His book 45, it's a collection of stories that differ from different scenarios and narratives, everything from detailing trips with his kids that lead him to reminisce about family trips with his own mother, father and his sister, to writing about going to Sarajevo in 1994, 95, trying to show the film, the K Foundation, them burning their £1 million, and where Bill writes about Serbia as a place of psychological shock, and just that phrase in this book, like, I read this book in 2006, and like I had never experienced the KLF as a band, as it says. So I was oblivious to who Bill Drummond was. It was Chinese whispers about who Bill Drummond was, and he was not, the KLF I never really wrote about when at the tail end of the 90s, when I was listening to Pulp and Oasis and or the late 90s bands. But KLF or Bill Drummond and Jimmy Cauty were never really wrote about, so I was oblivious to who they were. And then I got this book 45, and it was about 2006, and I read it and it really blew my mind. But a couple of years later, I'd got a book called Shock Doctrine by Naomi Klein, who details like economic shocks that the IMF had participated in the 70s in South America, where like General Pinochet and juntas, Argentina, and she goes into very detail of what shock doctrine really is. And when Bill's writing about a psychological shock in the middle of a civil war in Europe in the middle of the 90s, and it just reading it blew my mind, just the cross-referencing of it. He managed Echo and the Bunnymen, and their first single was reviewed as Single of the Week in the NME. Journalists were falling over themselves to interview the band, and in the interviews the Bunnymen were understandably asked, "Who's Echo?" The band answered it was the name of their drum machine. Now Bill contrive a conspiracy, really, of that the real Echo was something to do with a devil rabbit that his friend had illustrated for them, that somehow turned out in the background of the band sleeve, that nobody had put it there on purpose. It had inadvertently cropped into the artwork, the figure of a rabbit in the background, the Echo and the Bunnymen album sleeve. He goes on to state that it was about this time that I started to slope off and disappear into the live Walker Gallery in the centre of Liverpool. I was on the hunt for the real or even unimagined information on who this weird Echo character was. I assumed the Bunnymen referred to his followers, so it was among those bookshelves marked weird amongst religion, myth and tribal I was searching. The first thing anybody on this paper chase would come up with is Echo, the Greek mountain nymph, and I quote vainly, loved Pan, who in his wrath had her torn to pieces by a mad shepherd, only her voice remaining. There was something else about this Echo falling in love with the narcissist, but what sounded bollocks to me. It didn't correspond with the illustrations that his friend had done before him. The next thing I come across was a mythical hero of Algonquin tribe of Red Indians in North Canada. His name was Kluskave. Kluskave was born of a virgin, fights his evil brother, and after the Great Flood creates a new earth out of the piece of mud. He can take the form of a hare or a rabbit to travel the world. His home is in the Northlands, where he remains to this day, struggling for the welfare of the world. This was more like it. Kluskave sounded like he'd gotten all his archetypes in order, and he got 2 Ks in his name. My search continued. There was a nomadic Silverian tribe with a rabbit spirit who in some way was involved with the regeneration. There was more stuff from Viking culture and from a northern island of ancient Japan, then I found this. The concept of the trickster is related to that of the twin heroes, either or both of whom embody some of his aspects. A protean figure, Trickster is a creator but also cunningly deceives, and sometimes spiteful, sometimes too clever by half. He appears in both myth and folktale, forming the first world, recreating the earth after the flood, obtaining fire, creating man, casting his death and the loss of immortality, and defeating monsters. Where the creative role is assigned to some other figure, Trickster's role as an adventurer is predominant, but when he is the creative demiurge, he is also a joker. He is usually conceived of the ferromorphic terms on the northwest coast as raven, on the Great Plains in the southwest as coyote, in the woodlands as the great white hare or rabbit. The presence of echo equals ancient folklore and archetypes. Bill Drummond understood this completely. He knew exactly what Carl Jung was talking about with the collective unconscious. It's ancient archetypes, key lines, ley lines, interstellar ley lines. When I was reading these words back in 2006, they were just leaping out to me. Like, what does this even mean? And which was piquing my interest to go and research a lot of the philosophies that were getting spoken about. I see Bill is he's a philosopher, and he talks about in his book 45, contemporary art is made safe, unchallenging, boxed off, summarised. This prevents it performing its most vital function and helping us to see, feel, understand, celebrate, challenge and wonder at the world we are living in right now in ways never known before. Dark Dreamers and Lonely Watchers. That line is just magical, and he's quite a magical writer, I find. He conjures such vivid images with the words that he writes. It's just like next phrase, ritualistic symbolism and subversive fundamentalism. And I just found that mind blowing. Really, when I was younger, my younger self, when he talks about the notion of being Scottish, and he kind of nails it pretty head on for me. Really, when he addresses Scotland, what did the Tartan Army ever do for Scotland? Let's do or die. Forget fantasy football. This is fantasy nationalism. None of us give a shit, even those who vote SNP. We are all just running from our pathetic lives, running away from our wives, children and pathetic jobs, wrapping ourselves in a flag, walking in 1314, bonding in our national hatred of the common enemy, England. The only real history that we create in our lives is the only date is now. The only real enemy is ourselves. And I found that kind of spellbound, and just how much it hits the nail on the head with a lot of stuff that he writes about. When he addresses the power of poetry should never be underestimated. In his one poem, Scots Wha Hae, Robert the Bruce's imaginary address to his troops on the eve of Bannockburn, Robert Burns ensured that every boy coming through the Scottish education system knew exactly who the enemy was. He notes, what people really want to see is supposedly successful fuck-ups. The more spectacularly and painfully the better. The media know this. The only time someone from the entertainment world makes the headlines is when they are caught out or they die. And Bill, PR companies know this, marketing departments know this, PAs, anybody that works in public relations or tries to sway public opinion knows exactly all these terms that were opening my eyes to the world back in the day.